NFL here, specifically on some quarterbacks, as Tim Jenkins is kind enough to wake up with us here early on a Wednesday morning. He's a quarterback coach and film analyst, and his YouTube channel is All Things Quarterback, where he does some really great deep dives on quarterback play. Tim, thanks for the time today. Great to have you on the program. Let's begin with the Tua performance on Sunday against the Ravens. And I watched your breakdown. It was great. But I will ask you here, how much of that performance was actually Tua being great compared to really bad play by the Ravens secondary?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's a combination of both. I thought Tua really did a good job. There were a couple throws where he fits things in, like over the middle of the field. He threw a couple of in routes or like a over route where the tight end starts on one side of the formation, works to the other side, that were just big-time throws, right? So I thought he did a good job. The best clip I thought of the whole day to answer the Ravens secondary was actually the interception, right? So Tua throws an interception, and it happens because the safety, they're in too high, right? So normally those safeties are getting a ton of depth in too high. The safety jumps like a curl route. So to me, it was like if you were the OC for the Dolphins, right, or if you're McDaniel on the sideline, you see that a safety to Tyreek Hill's side is flat-footed and jumping a curl route, like you're the happiest guy on planet Earth, right? You just turned the ball over, but you're like, really? You're going to sit flat-footed on the side of the fastest human being on a football field right now? Like, that was just outlandish. And then we saw it the rest of the day, right? What did Miami do? They just started running go routes, and people were flat-footed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had busted coverage. So I think, like, a part of it was – I don't think it was like the Ravens secondary is bad at football. I think it was, for some reason, they were coached up like we're going to squat on routes against what everyone in the NFL thinks is the fastest receiving core we've ever seen, right? So to me, it was like – that just was kind of an outlandish move, and I think that's where you saw the compounding effect. And then I think we've got to give Tua credit, too, because there were wide-open guys. But listen, every time I cut on the All-22 and watch people, there's wide-open guys, right? So there's guys that are open that sometimes quarterbacks just don't get to because, hey, you know, the coverage doesn't dictate that our eyes are supposed to be there. So the fact that Tua was getting there, we've got to give him credit for that, too. But, no, I think it was a combination of Tua did have a darn good game. You can't throw 6 touchdowns and not be performing well. But the Ravens, I just don't understand what they were thinking in terms of trying to squat on some of these routes.
Very good. Brady has ruined it for everyone. But usually that cliff comes and you just lose it, right? Father Time is undefeated. Is it over for Matt Ryan? What do you see on the tape?
Yeah, man, the Matt Ryan one is interesting. We were talking about it a little bit before I jumped on, where it's like, you know, the Colts had success with Carson Wentz. So then when Matt Ryan comes to town, you see all the mic'd up segments coming out of there, right, where he's coaching up the receivers. You're like, man, this is going to be really exciting stuff. And then you turn on the preseason, and granted it's preseason, but they look like they're operating efficiently. And then all of a sudden it's been like, you know, the first half against Houston was atrocious. Then they come out and they score 20, right, to tie it against the Texans. Uh-huh. And then you lose the Jags, who Carson Wentz and the Commanders beat in week 1, right? So you know Carson Wentz is sitting up in Washington like, that's right, suckers, right? Like, you guys switch to that. You know, as Brady would say, you switch to that MFer, and look, now you lost to the team that I just beat, right? So to me, I think Matt Ryan, I'm not ready to write him off as like it's done. I always have to preface it for myself, especially – you know, and even Russell in Denver, where I'm sitting there and it's like, what the heck is going on with some of these guys? And I got to remember that even Tampa was rough when Brady made the switch. And I think if Tom Brady switches to a new offense and there's some growing pains, like I'm assuming that everyone else on planet Earth is going to have the same. But listen, you guys you're spot on about Father Time, because he does not look like he's driving the ball like he's done in the past. And I always am. It's always hard on me as a former quarterback guy, right? Like, or as a former quarterback, when you sit there and you go like, man, is it that he's lost the arm strength, or is it that he's just not convinced what he's seeing with his eyes yet because it's a new system? Like, I think both things are factoring in there. I definitely think he's not the Matt Ryan of old, but, you know, mentally he's light years ahead. So you'd think like that makes up for a lot of it. So I'm not ready to write him off yet, but listen, the Colts got to get that thing fixed, because, you know, the AFC, I think, to steal a wild card spot, man, I think is going to be so darn competitive. And then all of a sudden you got to think like, you know, everybody's been cutting on and watching the Bills on national TV just steamroll people. So you got to get the ship going in the right direction, or you're going to end up going up to Buffalo in the divisional game, and that's just, I don't think, going to go well for anybody.
Good point. Follow the money here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Tim Jenkins, our guest, quarterback coach and film analyst. His YouTube channel is All Things Quarterback. You live in the Denver area, so what problems have you identified with this team on offense by watching film?
Yeah, man, it's so the Denver media market too is a little crazy. I think people are already calling for Hackett's head. Here's what I'll say: is it's been a rough start from a time management perspective, which I think a lot of people can understand. If you're calling plays from the sideline, then situationally you're getting in a certain down and distances where you're not sure if you're going for it or, kicking a field goal, and you waste the timeout. And everybody saw it Monday night, right? So it's like the dude's been lit up by everyone. Here's what I'll say. This offense is legitimately 6 plays, and I'm not talking about hey, 6 really, really, hey, we overthrew them by a yard. I'm talking about 6 plays that are inches away of having 42 more points, and then nobody's saying anything about these guys, right? Because they had a tight end who was an inch out of bounds. They threw a slot fade this week where the guy's an inch out of bounds, and we're talking about I don't even want to say an inch, millimeters. So to me, it's they're really, really close. They flat out, when you get to the red zone, they need to run the football. They are running the football so darn effectively. And then all of a sudden they get to the, half-yard line, and they're like, hey, let's throw some 50-50 balls to Cortland Sutton. Which, as a quarterback guy, I get, man. When I was in St. Louis, if you caught me in training camp, I'm just trying to throw 50-50 balls so I can have a couple of touchdowns before they fired me, right? Russell's in a little different spot than I was. He ain't getting cut right away. So let's just hand it off, get the touchdown, and move on, because they've been effective in the run game. And honestly, if they do that, if they just run the ball inside the 5-yard line, they're going to be fine. They've got a tough one this week because I don't think San Francisco's an easy out. And I think Jimmy G honestly makes them possibly a little tougher in the short term. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out this week for them.
Big game tomorrow. When you watch the tape, is it a quarterback and Trubisky who doesn't want to make a mistake and not taking chances, or is it scheme and conservative play calling?
Yeah, well, I think the Steelers are an interesting case here. I think when you watch that Bengals tape from week 1, right? I want to say they called a little bit of a conservative game for him. I think they're trying to ease him into it, right? But I also think there are some shots downfield that were just, we're a millisecond late on pulling the trigger, which then forces us, hey, we got to get to our check down, or, hey, we've got to start to scramble around. I think, honestly, they're going to be fine, but it's so hard saying that when you've got Kenny Pickett, who played well, sitting there kind of waiting around for a lot of people, want to see him get in there and play. I really think they're going to work through it. I think Trubisky is going to end up, I honestly think they're going to end up having a shot. They're going to have to figure out how to beat the Ravens, right? Which is going to be a tough out. But I think they've got a shot in Pittsburgh. I do think we're so used to seeing them be successful, which makes it even worse when they do kind of, stutter on offense. But to me, I'm not ready to make the switch yet. Okay. But I get why a lot of people are, because you've got Pickett, who had such a darn good preseason for a rookie.
Very good information. You can follow Tim on Twitter at @TJenkinsElite. And again, subscribe to his YouTube channel. It's called All Things Quarterback. Tim, you do a fantastic job breaking down NFL film. And thank you for coming on so early today. We appreciate that.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.